I'm going to tell y'all a story and take it for what it is. I'm not trying to make any predictions. I'm just telling y'all how my mind works. And over the last 35 years, it worked a significant percentage of the time. I would say 85 or 90% of the time, the thoughts that I have end up playing out. So I have a sister. I don't talk to her at all anymore. But in 2015, she'd had a brokerage account with me, let's say for 20 years. She'd always say, I don't want to lose any money. I don't want to lose any money. Like, she didn't want to lose any money. She didn't belong more than maybe 10 or 20% in stocks. If somebody tells me they don't want to lose any money and they have a very low risk tolerance, then I'm not going to sit there and try to convince them why they have to have a greater percentage of their money in stocks, because in bonds, I could make somebody 6 or 7% a year without taking almost any risk at all. So I had our portfolio probably 80% in fixed income and 20% in stocks. And then our IRA, which had started at a very low level, let's say 15,000, let's say it was 40, but it was sitting mostly in cash, because at that moment in time I didn't like anything. She had married a guy who used to tell people what to do with their 401ks. Maybe he'd even worked at a big corporation and he would advise people on their 401ks. But he told her when I moved in 2014 to another firm that he would help her and she'd put her shit at Schwab for whatever. I barely charge her anything, but they're so fucking cheap. Maybe they didn't want to even pay $1. But so she moved the account to Schwab. I think she was maybe the only client that didn't move with me. But I know that he's just got her long-term, all in the stock market, probably mostly like S&P 500 type of thing. This is 2015. So 11 years later, I can tell by her behavior, she comes in town more to see my mother, which means she's feeling good about her money. And at other times when the market was down its little bit for a little bit of time, she would be pulling back and scared and talking a fucking poor mouth and whatever. But she's a cheap person. She's not a big money maker and she's not a big thinker. She's a small thinker. And she's definitely not financially brilliant or have any financially acumen. She's financially illiterate, basically, but for her husband tells her, you just always stick out the ups and downs of the stock market. And part of my thinking of why I think what's coming ahead, the market's at 230% of GDP. The valuations are as high as could be. The debt in the country is 39, 40 trillion. Interest rates have been inching up. But my sister, who we'll call her Lucifer, she's in her portfolio. She's never, since 2014, dealt with a 2008-9 style. She's never dealt with a 2000 style 50 to 60% garden variety correction. When I got in the business in the 90s, many of very wealthy, brilliant, rich people, they didn't have any money in stocks. And then over time, maybe they had 10 or 15 or 20% stocks. And then all of a sudden, every last person has 80, 90, 100% of their money in stocks. And people like my sister are very comfortable with their stock market portfolio. And they're almost a little bit, chest out, feathers fluffing, because the market never goes down. But if it is, they're convinced that they're going to be able to stick it out. Well, I was around in 2007, 8, 9, and many very wealthy people didn't feel so good, and many didn't stick it out, many pulled back. Same with 2000. But what has just happened over the last 17 years is Pavlov's dog has people thinking the market's never going to have a big, long, brutal bear market. And I'm saying this because I'm usually right. I'm not telling anybody to panic. I'm saying the market is at a ridiculous valuation. There's a whole generation of people like my sister who likely doesn't belong more than 50% in stocks at any moment in time in her life, because her portfolio has grown over the years. Her income is not commensurate with her portfolio. And so a large loss of 50% of her portfolio would likely have her under the bed crying like a little bitch and unable to withstand it. Maybe even causing her to fucking want to really choke her husband, because how could he have told her to get in this? But for 12 years, she's been able to ride this out. I got in the business in 92. In 2008, people had barely made any money after a fucking unbelievable bull market, and then a bear market, and then a big bull market. But 16 years in, long-term investing didn't look so smart. We're now 17, 18 years in. I have a feeling, just not that the market's not going to ultimately recover if you're young or whatever, but people like her that have gotten their feathers out this last 15, 16 years, they just haven't had a 50% down that took 3 years, 4 years to recover. Everything they've had is down, straight back up. And people like her are people that are not knowledgeable or not financially sophisticated. They weren't meant to be 100% in stocks and just be able to know that they could ride out all the ups and downs. Because if that was that easy, then there would be no reason to have fixed income. There'd be no reason to have CDs at the bank. Nobody would ever need to even look at a bond. And there was brilliant people around before the 90s way smarter than my sister that had zero participation in stocks. So my belief is that this is a horrible time to be getting in the averages, not individual stocks. I think individual stocks, you can buy individual stocks and do fantastic. But people like her that have not had a comeuppance, or that are very arrogant about the fact that this is a different time in the market and the 230% of GDP doesn't matter, the PEs don't matter, nothing basically matters. There's nothing in this country that could cause a prolonged bear market. I mean, Warren Buffett said that we always recover from our disasters and we overcome everything in this country. But that's not exactly what he meant. He meant he did. He could see past 10, 15 years. Most people cannot. Most people out there cannot handle a 50% decline in their stocks that stays flat for 3 years. People are holding on to their stocks now as if it would be the biggest mistake ever to pull back and maybe even pare back to only 50% invested. I can assure you in 08, 09, people didn't think like they did today. And in 01, 02, 03, they didn't think like they did today. I've never seen a more bold set of Americans with more conviction that they don't have to worry, and nobody wants to get out. Nobody gets out at the high because they don't want to miss whatever, because people are greedy pigs. But the market is outrageously valued, and too many people that don't have financial acumen, that are financially illiterate, they're heavily invested in stocks, and they've never had a comeuppance. And everybody has to have a comeuppance. I've had several. I've had many. That's where I learned my biggest lessons. But people like Lucifer and many other Americans, I don't want anybody to ever have a down in the S&P 500. I wish we could just maybe only ever have 10 or 20% downs, but consistently click higher and nobody would ever have to worry. But that's not what this game is meant to be. So my point is, if you're in investments that are attractively valued, hold on and maybe buy more and you'll do fantastic. But if you're in things that are outrageously valued, and you don't think you can lose 50 or 60% of your money and that it stays down there for longer than what you can handle, sadly, I think you're going to be mistaken.